Jet America extends a personal invitation to enjoy our personal touch service beginning December 15th. Take us up on it.
Join me on the next Late Show with talk show hostess Oprah Winfrey.
Monday night at 10:35. From the Twin Cities, this is the Upper Midwest first look at tonight's news. This is Primetime News.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Rod Grant.
And I'm Heather Harden. Coming up tonight on Primetime News, a verdict in the temple of former People's Temple and Jonestown cult member Larry Layton. Some new pink slips will soon be going out at the state capitol.
Also, a new study reveals big problems in the way the U.S. tests for drunk drivers, and a local charity prepares itself for an enormous number of needy this holiday season. But topping our news tonight, President Reagan says that he would welcome the appointment of an independent counsel to look into the Contra-Iran affair, if that's what the Justice Department is recommending.
The president has ordered the National Security Council to suspend secret operations while a review board studies its role in the deal.
And the Senate Intelligence Committee today questioned a key player in the controversy. We have two reports tonight, beginning first with CNN's Frank Sesno.
President Reagan, trying to put his house back in order, has directed his National Security Council to cease operational involvement in sensitive diplomatic, military, or intelligence missions. The president told his special review board to study whether and under what circumstances the NSC should be so involved.
You will have the full cooperation of all agencies of the executive branch and the White House staff in carrying out your assignment.
The board members say their questioning may include the president himself.
The president will be available to respond to questions from us. He has pledged his cooperation.
We are free to put questions to anybody we choose to within the government, and we will do that.
The Special Review Board will not look into possible criminal activity. Attorney General Meese, along with the FBI, is doing that.
The Department of Justice investigation is continuing with my full support and cooperation. And if they determine an independent counsel is called for, I would welcome that appointment.
In fact, senior White House aides, including embattled Chief of Staff Donald Regan, have now concluded that a special prosecutor should be named very quickly, although Meese must first conclude there is specific, credible evidence that laws have been broken. The Special Review Board, however, will not have the power to subpoena witnesses. It is to report to the president within 60 days. The board will talk to fired NSC operative Oliver North and former NSC chiefs Poindexter and McFarland, among others. During his Senate career, John Tower was McFarland's boss, and that has raised questions of possible conflict.
I intend to pursue this inquiry with cold objectivity. My loyalty to my country exceeds my loyalty to any individual or any partisan endeavor.
Meanwhile, questions persist about what the president meant when he said last Tuesday he was not fully informed about what was going on.
Well, does that mean you had no knowledge at all?
That's what I said.
In fact, the president has not said that. So reporters requested White House spokesman Larry Speakes to ask bluntly if Reagan had any knowledge of the Swiss bank account Contra funding matter. Reagan's reply, "You can tell them flat out that I had no knowledge whatsoever of it until Ed Meese briefed me on it Monday afternoon." The president tells Time magazine the crisis gripping his presidency is little more than a beltway bloodletting, referring to the roadway encircling Washington and which often defines it. But it's been learned that top political advisors and Mrs. Reagan are now telling the president the crisis is very real and he must come to grips with it. Frank Sesno, CNN, the White House.
Among the day's first witnesses, former National Security Advisor Robert McFarland, who says he learned about the secret diversion of Iran arms money last spring, and Oliver North, the Marine Lieutenant Colonel, fired from the National Security Council staff and described by Attorney General Meese as the key figure in the cash transfer to Central America. McFarland spent about 6 hours with the committee. Another prime witness expected to be heard from this week is Admiral John Poindexter, who resigned last week as National Security Advisor. Poindexter reportedly failed to look into the Iran-Contra connection, though he knew about it. The first phase of the Intelligence Committee probe is scheduled to last 2 weeks. Meanwhile, there was growing agreement on Capitol Hill Monday over the need for a select committee to investigate the Iran affair, but disagreement over calling a special session of Congress. Incoming Democratic Senate Leader Robert Byrd is against it.
I think that would send the wrong signal. It would create an atmosphere of crisis. It isn't necessary.
Outgoing Republican Senate Leader Robert Dole, reflecting GOP political worries, favors a special session.
The party has some stakes in this also. We certainly want to be helpful to the president, but we have also a party interest, and we'd like to get moving on it.
Gene Randall, CNN on Capitol Hill.
Meanwhile, Anglican Church envoy Terry Waite says he's renewed his efforts to free the hostages. He told reporters today that the controversy about the U.S. dealings with Iran and Nicaragua has frayed some of his Shiite Muslim contacts, but he says he doesn't think his work has been undermined.
The U.S. Supreme Court is going to take up the issue of whether the federal government has the right to withhold any highway funds from states that refuse to raise the minimum drinking age to 21. South Dakota authorities say that practice unconstitutionally weakens state powers. The federal law aims to reduce drunken driving deaths among teenagers. National figures on drinking-related fatal accidents are inaccurate and misleading. That is the conclusion of a study released over the weekend by the Crime Control Institute. It says less than half of the drivers in fatal traffic accidents are tested for alcohol, and as Steve Goodspeed reports, the concern is that we don't have a clear picture of the drunk driving problem.
National Transportation Department figures indicate the percentage of traffic fatalities involving drunk drivers has gone down over the past several years. But the authors of the report by the Crime Control Institute say the numbers are wrong because so many drivers are not tested. The report says that nationally in 1984, only 3/4 of all dead drivers were tested for alcohol, and among surviving drivers, only 1/4 were tested. Minneapolis Police Chief Tony Boza chairs the Institute and says with so few drivers tested, we don't really know the severity of the problem.
They're looking at an iceberg, the tip of which is the fatal accidents, the mass of which on the water is an enormous carnage in terms of tremendously serious injuries, paralysis, accidents, property damage. And we think we're looking at that tip and seeing it clearly, but we're not.
The report also indicates that many repeat offenders are overlooked because national figures only look at previous offenses in the past 3 years. Yet in Minnesota, where records go back 8 years, 1/4 of all drunk drivers in fatal accidents are repeat offenders. Those behind the drunk driving report hope it will prompt some law changes in states across the nation, convincing citizens that drunk drivers continue to be a huge threat on the nation's highways. Steve Goodspeed, Channel 9 News, the Twin Cities.
And the president of the Crime Control Institute, which put together this study, is Professor Lawrence Sherman of the University of Maryland. He's with us here tonight. Mr. Sherman, thank you very much for taking your time to be with us. What about the figures? You say they're no good at all as far as what the federal government is saying, that the numbers are down. What is wrong with the figures that the government is giving us?
Every year they're telling us precisely how many people are supposedly killed in drunk driving-caused accidents. And that makes us assume that we're testing all drivers in fatal accidents. The fact is we're not even trying to test and detect and prosecute drunk driving and fatal accidents. The state laws in most states prohibit the police from conducting a test unless somebody shows visible signs of slurred speech or they can't walk straight. Many alcoholics and others are quite capable of being drunk and driving poorly but not showing the visible signs of intoxication. So what we need is tougher state laws that allow the police to test everybody who drives in a fatal accident.
So we're talking about federal numbers, but they boil down to state law. So what are the variances among states? And they're the ones that have to control these figures. And where does Minnesota stand? Which are good states in testing and which are bad?
Well, Vermont's about the best. They're the only state with a law that empowers police to test everybody in a fatal accident. And the state of Delaware has a medical examiner's policy. But after that, you have 40 states that require testing dead drivers. But most of those states aren't in compliance. And Minnesota does test the majority of their drivers. On the other hand, if you have people who are surviving the accidents and walking away from it, and the majority of the people in Minnesota, 62% of them, walk away from these accidents without being tested, then I think you've got a problem. That's why in Minnesota, Commissioner Cheetah of Public Safety is recommending that the state legislature require testing in every accident where somebody's sent away in an ambulance. Because they might die at a later point. And that kind of testing is going to lead to the prosecution of more people and better counting. But the important thing is that we catch the drunk driver and prevent them from doing it again and killing somebody else.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Lawrence Sherman. Thank you very much. Back to Heather.
Still ahead tonight, some interesting results of a new survey of American handgun owners. And Kevin Burns reports on a group of Republicans at the state capitol looking for work, and they're not politicians. Stay with us.
We work days and nights together, and you become a family. And there's a lot of people you became close to, and some of those people did lose the election. And it's hard to let go of those people because you had such a bond.
When an urgent package leaves your hands, make sure the hands you leave it in can deliver. Express Mail overnight service from your post office delivers over city, over state, overnight, over whatever stands in the way, over 97% of the time, and climbing, for about half what most others charge. £2, just $10.75. Express Mail overnight service. When we say overnight, we mean overnight.
Of the 3 leading corn insecticides, only diphenate delivers control without compromise. Lorsban compromises on consistent rootworm control, and Counter compromises by just suppressing cutworms. But diphenate controls cutworms without compromise and controls rootworms without compromise. And diphenate is guaranteed. Take control with diphenate. Control without compromise.
Foreman & Clark's vast selection of suits assures you of just the right suit for any occasion. Unless, of course, you really should be wearing a Speedo. And Foreman & Clark's insistence on using only the finest fabrics, linings, and high-quality construction means that the suit you select will last and last. Unless, of course, you expose it to the most unusual situations.
Farm Tough Deutsch Alice, rated by leading American and Canadian consumer magazines as having the very best in walk-behind snowblowers, offers 7 different models, ranging from 3.5 to 8 horsepower, with a space-age cab available, along with many tractor-mount snowblowers and blades. Deutsch Alice is now offering 6.9 financing to qualified buyers. Visit these Deutsch Alice dealers today. Lano's Equipment Norwood, Gerlach Service Cottage Grove, Gilbert Motors Hudson, Schramm Implement Hutchinson, and Lano's Equipment Shakopee.
There were more casualties from last month's elections announced today.
DFLers in the House have come up with a plan which would cut the number of IR staff members by 2/3.
It's all part of the reorganization taking place since the DFL regained control of the House from the Republicans. Tonight, Kevin Burns reports on the people caught in the middle of the political crossfire.
Goodbye, Chuck Dimmler.
It wasn't only politicians who were voted out of office last month. Republican staff members now face prospects of joining another minority, the unemployed.
It's tough. It's a hard time of year to look for a job. With Christmas, people are getting ready for Christmas, and they're not interested in interviewing people. And you never know till the last minute, so you really didn't prepare.
It's the job of the majority leadership to determine the staff size for both caucuses. For the last 2 years, DFLers have employed 48 permanent staff members. That number will jump to more than 100 since they're now in the majority. IRs have carried about 100 permanent employees for the last 2 years. A new proposal would cut that to less than 40. While the numbers are preliminary, the proposal has left many staff members with a sour taste in their mouths. For starters, these are partisan jobs. It's unlikely an IR staffer would take a position with the DFL caucus. And while most were aware of the volatility of a job in politics, still there is anger and frustration. The question is where to vent it. After all, it's the will of the people who created the staff openings 2 years ago. Now it's that same will forcing these people to update their resumes in a big hurry.
The nature of the game of politics is that there is some pettiness and there is some bickering, and it's just the way the game is played. And I think the people that are here understand that, because if they didn't understand that, they probably shouldn't have gotten into politics in the first place.
There is some good news for IR staff members being laid off here. With their experience, most should be able to find new jobs fairly quickly. And when they do, no doubt it'll be for a lot more money than they're currently making. Kevin Burns, Channel 9 News, at the Capitol.
MTC workers have accepted a new contract averting the possibility of a strike later this month. Members of the